The night was deathly silent. Silent. Keanu Reeves stood at the edge of Iron Fang, his elite K9 training facility, scanning the horizon with sharp, calculating eyes. The air smelled of dust and anticipation. The wolves of war were coming. Beside him, Ghost, a massive white German shepherd, stood rigid, his ears perked up. The dog sensed it before any of the security systems did. His instincts never failed. And then, like a whisper before a storm, the first explosion shattered the silence. A fiery blast erupted at the perimeter fence, sending chunks of debris flying into the air. Floodlights flickered, casting eerie shadows across the compound. Keanu didn't flinch. He had been expecting this. Sombra Negra had finally made their move. Through the smoke and dust, the dark silhouettes of heavily armed men emerged. Tactical vests, suppressed rifles, military precision. This wasn't just a cartel raid. This was a full-scale military assault. Keanu raised a fist, signaling his team. From various positions around the compound, his warriors, both human and canine, prepared for battle. Marcus Bear Johnson, his best friend and head of security, whispered through the earpiece, "They're coming in heavy, brother. We're outnumbered." Keanu exhaled slowly. So be it. Then, the K9 units moved into action. Ghost sprinted forward, his white fur a blur in the darkness. Rex 3, a muscular Belgian Malinois, followed, while Thunder, the hulking Doberman, flanked them. They were not just dogs, they were warriors. The first enemy squad breached the outer perimeter. That was their first mistake. From the shadows, Shadow, the black-coated Dutch shepherd, struck first. Like a phantom, he lunged at a masked intruder, sinking his fangs into the man's forearm before twisting with brutal precision. The mercenary screamed as he collapsed. Gunfire erupted. The night exploded with chaos. Keanu moved with the practiced efficiency of a man who had danced with death too many times before. He raised his suppressed pistol and fired. One shot, one kill. More explosions rocked the compound. Sombra Negra had underestimated Iron Fang, and tonight, they were about to learn why this was a mistake they would not live to regret. Keanu moved like a ghost through the battlefield, his pistol steady, each shot precise. He wasn't just defending Iron Fang, he was orchestrating a war. A mercenary took cover behind a fallen crate, aiming a rifle toward the main kennel. Before he could fire, thunder struck. The Doberman launched forward with terrifying speed, his powerful jaws clamping onto the attacker's wrist. The man screamed, but it was too late. A single gunshot from Keanu ended it. Marcus's voice crackled in his earpiece. "They're breaching the west gate. Heavy armor. We need to move." The message was cut short by a massive explosion. Keanu turned in time to see flames licking the sky, a transport truck crashing through the steel-reinforced gate. The cartel wasn't holding back. They wanted Iron Fang wiped off the map. But Keanu had prepared for this moment. "Deploy countermeasures," he ordered. Hidden charges placed along the secondary perimeter detonated, sending shockwaves through the advancing forces. Dirt, debris, and bodies were thrown into the air. The confusion bought them precious seconds. Rex 3, Ghost, and Shadow seized the opportunity. They wove through the smoke, striking like trained assassins. One mercenary was taken down before he even realized the danger. Another stumbled backward as Ghost clamped onto his shoulder, dragging him into the darkness. A second truck barreled through the compound, mounted with a .50 caliber machine gun. It swiveled toward the main control center, ready to tear through defenses. Keanu reacted instantly, sprinting toward an abandoned rifle on the ground. He slid behind cover, bringing the weapon to his shoulder. Before he could fire, Marcus emerged from the shadows, launching an RPG. The warhead slammed into the truck, engulfing it in a fiery explosion. The gunner was thrown clear, hitting the ground with a sickening thud. Keanu wiped sweat from his brow. The battle was far from over. Through the smoke, he saw a lone figure watching from the ridgeline, the unmistakable silhouette of El Diablo, leader of Sombra Negra. He wasn't here just to destroy Iron Fang. He wanted Keanu Reeves dead. Keanu met his gaze, his grip tightening on his weapon. "Come and get me." 12 hours earlier, the sun hung low over the vast desert, casting long shadows across Iron Fang, a facility that few knew existed but many feared. It wasn't just a canine training center, it was a fortress, a last line of defense against those who thrived in the darkness. Keanu Reeves stood at the edge of the main training ground, watching as Ghost and Rex 3 sprinted through an advanced tactical drill. The German Shepherd and Belgian Malinois moved like ghosts, weaving through obstacles with razor-sharp precision. Keanu didn't just train dogs. He trained warriors. A deep voice broke his focus. Marcus Bear Johnson, towering at 6'4", approached with an unlit cigar between his fingers. "You hear the chatter?" he asked. Keanu nodded. He had received the same intel from Carlos Ramirez, a seasoned border agent and one of their few allies in law enforcement. The Sombra Negra cartel had been moving weapons across the border, preparing for something big. Inside the main operations room, the team gathered. Dr. Emily Carter, Iron Fang's head veterinarian, studied the medical reports of the K9 South, ensuring they were combat-ready. "They sensed something," she said, adjusting her glasses. "They're on edge." Carlos entered, his expression grim. "We intercepted some encrypted transmissions," he said, placing a tablet on the table. A grainy satellite image appeared, a convoy of armored vehicles moving toward the border. Marcus let out a low whistle. "That's military-grade hardware." Keanu studied the image. His gut told him what was coming. This wasn't a simple raid. This was an extermination mission. He turned to his team. "If they come, they won't find an easy target. They'll find hell waiting for them." Emily folded her arms. "Are you sure we shouldn't call for backup?" Keanu met her gaze. "By the time they get here, it'll be too late." The team fell into a tense silence. They had all seen war before in one form or another. Marcus had led counter-terrorist operations in the Middle East. Emily had patched up wounded soldiers in combat zones, and Keanu had spent years eliminating threats before they could strike. They weren't just trainers or handlers. They were survivors. Outside, the desert stretched endlessly, a harsh and unforgiving landscape. But to the K9 units of Iron Fang, it was home. Ghost stood near the fence line, ears perked, eyes scanning the horizon. He sensed the shift in the air, then seen danger creeping closer. Keanu walked over to him, kneeling beside the German Shepherd. "You feel it too, don't you?" Ghost let out a low growl, his fur bristling. In the control room, Carlos worked through layers of encrypted messages. "Sombra Negra's been quiet for too long," he muttered. "They're planning something, and it's coming soon." He glanced at Keanu. "We need to get the dogs out of here." Keanu shook his head. "No. If we run, we give them exactly what they want." Marcus exhaled sharply. "Then we fight." That night, the team fortified Iron Fang, reinforcing weak points, setting up tactical defenses. Keanu and Marcus ran combat drills with the dogs, preparing them for the worst. Each K9 was more than just muscle. They were strategic weapons, trained to move in formation, strike from the shadows, and disrupt enemy operations with precision. By dawn, everything was in place. But as Keanu stood atop the watchtower, scanning the empty desert, he knew the silence wouldn't last. War was coming. The wind carried a scent that didn't belong. Ghost stood at the perimeter, his body tense, his nose twitching. Something was out there. Keanu saw it in the way Ghost's ears flicked, the way his stance shifted ever so slightly. A predator had entered their territory. Marcus was in the control room, reviewing drone footage. "Got movement. 6 miles out. Could be nothing, could be everything." He zoomed in on the grainy infrared feed. Figures moved through the desert, keeping low, avoiding open ground. Trained. Tactical. Not just cartel thugs. Carlos' voice came through the radio. "Confirmed. We intercepted radio traffic. They're scouting." Keanu adjusted his gear. "Then let's show them we see them." Minutes later, he was outside, moving through the shadows like a ghost. Ghost, Shadow, and Thunder flanked him, their movements silent, lethal. They weren't just tracking the enemy. They were stalking them. They reached a ridge overlooking a dry riverbed. Below, 5 mercenaries in dark combat gear moved cautiously. Keanu could tell by their movements they weren't amateurs. These were professionals. He gave the signal. Shadow struck first. The Dutch Shepherd exploded from the darkness, clamping his jaws around the nearest mercenary's arm before he could react. The others turned, weapons raising too late. Ghost launched forward, taking another down with brutal precision. Keanu fired once, twice clean, efficient. 2 survivors ran. Thunder went after them. The Doberman was built for speed, and in seconds, one was down, screaming as Thunder's teeth found flesh. The last mercenary reached for his radio. Kinu's knife found his throat before he could speak. The fight was over in under 15 seconds. Keanu wiped his blade clean. "They were testing us," he said. Marcus' voice crackled through the earpiece. "Yeah. And now they have their answer." Keanu searched the bodies. No gang tattoos, no cartel insignias. Their gear was military grade, their weapons American made. He picked up a comm unit from one of the fallen men, adjusting the frequency. Static. Then, a voice. Spanish. Heavily accented. Equipo no, inform. Team 1, report. Silence. Then again, sharper this time. Equipo no, respond in a horror. Keanu crushed the radio under his boot. "They'll know something went wrong," he muttered. Marcus' voice came through his earpiece. "You need to get back." Carlos intercepted another transmission. "They're moving sooner than we thought." By the time Keanu returned to Iron Fang, the tension was suffocating. Emily was inside the medical bay, checking over the K9 south, ensuring their stamina and focus. Marcus was at the security monitors, watching drone feeds. Carlos laid a tablet on the table. Convoy spotted. 6 vehicles, at least 20 hostiles, moving in formation. "They're coming straight for us." Keanu studied the screen. "ETA?" Carlos checked his watch. 4 hours. Marcus exhaled through his nose. "They're coming in waves. First, scouts. Next, shock troops. Then, the real assault." Keanu rolled his shoulders. "Then we give them a welcome they won't forget." They moved fast. Emily secured medical supplies in the underground bunker. Carlos reinforced weak points in the perimeter. Marcus set up kill zones, preparing the battlefield. Keanu checked his weapons, then checked his dogs. Rex the Third was ready. Ghost's eyes burned with anticipation. Thunder and Shadow prowled near the armory, sensing what was to come. The storm was here, and Iron Fang was ready. The first shot shattered the night. A sniper round struck the outer watchtower, sending sparks flying. It had begun. Keanu didn't flinch. He had been through this before. He moved through the compound swiftly, his mind calculating every angle, every potential weak spot. The convoy of Sombra Negra had reached the perimeter, their vehicles forming a blockade. Headlights flickered in the darkness, cutting through the dust. Then came the second wave. Gunfire erupted, flashes of muzzle fire illuminating the desert. Bullets tore into the walls, ricocheting off reinforced barriers. Marcus returned fire from the east tower, his rifle spitting controlled bursts. "They're testing us," he muttered. Keanu's radio crackled. Carlos' voice, tense but calm, confirmed hostiles moving on foot. South quadrant, flanking formation. Keanu signaled. Time to let the dogs off the leash. Ghost and Shadow were the first to move, slipping into the night like specters. Their targets never saw them coming. A strangled cry, the sound of tearing flesh, then silence. To down. More gunmen pushed forward. Thunder launched from the shadows, his powerful frame colliding with an enemy, knocking him flat before sinking his teeth into the man's throat. Keanu fired twice, covering the K9's flank. Another body dropped. A grenade was hurled toward the main entrance. Rex 3 reacted first. The Malinois sprinted forward, grabbed the explosive in his jaws, and tossed it back toward their attackers. The explosion lit up the desert, sending bodies flying. Keanu barely had time to register the chaos before his instincts screamed. He ducked. A bullet whizzed past his ear. Sniper. Marcus was already on it. One shot, one kill. The body tumbled from the ridge. Keanu exhaled. They were still standing. But Sombra Negra was just getting started. A second explosion rocked the compound. Smoke billowed from the eastern perimeter as Sombra Negra's breaching team advanced, rifles up, moving in tight formation. They weren't just storming in. They were executing a coordinated assault. These weren't ordinary cartel enforcers. These were trained mercenaries. Keanu moved fast, positioning himself near a shipping container as the first wave breached. He fired 3 shots in quick succession head to chest, head dropping to attackers before they could react. Marcus was covering the rooftop, his sniper rifle eliminating targets with mechanical precision. But the cartel had learned. They adapted. A second squad moved under covering fire, pinning Keanu's team down. A machine gun mounted on a modified truck began unloading rounds into the facility, tearing through concrete barriers. The ground trembled under the sustained barrage. Carlos' voice crackled in the earpiece. They're bringing up armor. We need to take that truck out now. Keanu scanned the battlefield. I got it. Ghost moved beside him, muscles tensed, ready. Keanu grabbed a smoke grenade from his belt, pulled the pin, and tossed it. The area around the truck was instantly engulfed in thick gray mist. Then Rex 3 and Thunder moved. The K9 South darted through the smoke, low to the ground, and seen. The gunner barely had time to react before Thunder leaped onto the vehicle, his teeth sinking into the driver's neck. The truck swerved. Rex 3 followed, launching into the back seat. The screams were brief. The truck veered off course and crashed into a barricade, bursting into flames. Keanu didn't stop moving. He reloaded, advanced, took down 3 more cartel soldiers. His team was pushing back, but he could feel it this wasn't the final wave. Then he saw him. Al Diablo. The cartel leader stood atop a ridgeline, watching the battlefield unfold, a cruel smirk on his face. His men were disposable. He wasn't here to win a battle. He was here to watch Keanu burn. Keanu locked eyes with him. This wasn't over. Keanu exhaled slowly, steadying his aim. Al Diablo stood just out of range, watching the battle unfold like a spectator at a blood sport. The cartel leader wasn't moving because he didn't have to. Then Keanu heard it. Engines. A deep, guttural roar filled the air as 3 armored vehicles tore across the desert, moving straight for Iron Fang's southern perimeter. Mounted machine guns swiveled, targeting defensive positions. Sombra Negro wasn't trying to breach anymore. They were trying to level the entire facility. Marcus' voice cut through the radio. We need to take those trucks out before they pin us down. Keanu moved, sprinting between cover. Bullets slammed into steel and concrete, sparks flying inches from his head. He slid behind a barricade, reloading as he surveyed the battlefield. They were outgunned, outmanned but not outmatched. Ghost and Shadow were already moving. The K9 South flanked the first truck, weaving through the chaos. Shadow darted underneath, latching onto the gunner's leg, yanking him down. The man screamed as he tumbled off the vehicle, his rifle clattering to the dirt. Ghost was faster. He leaped, his powerful frame smashing into the driver's side window. Teeth met flesh. Blood sprayed across the glass. The truck veered off course, crashing into a supply crate. The explosion sent a shockwave through the compound. One down. Keanu turned, locking onto the second vehicle. He raised his rifle, aiming for the gunner. One breath, one shot. The round pierced the man's skull, sending his body toppling over. The driver panicked, swerving wildly right into Marcus' kill zone. The former sniper fired an RPG. The warhead struck dead center, turning the truck into a fireball. Keanu didn't celebrate. He turned toward the third and final vehicle. Al Diablo was still watching, waiting. This was far from over. Keanu barely had time to react before the third truck accelerated, its reinforced front smashing through a barricade like it was paper. The mounted gunner unleashed a storm of bullets, forcing him to dive behind a supply crate. Sombra Negro wasn't retreating. They were doubling down. Marcus' voice crackled through the radio. We need heavy firepower. Now. Keanu scanned the area. The RPG was out of reach. They had one shot left. Rex, he called. The Malinois was already moving. Low, fast, deadly. He darted between debris, closing in on the truck. The gunner spotted him too late. Rex leaped onto the hood, clothes scraping metal, teeth sinking into the man's throat. The gunfire stopped instantly. Keanu sprinted forward, climbing onto the side of the truck. He yanked the door open, shoved his pistol against the driver's skull, and pulled the trigger. The man slumped over, his body falling against the gas pedal. The truck swerved, tires skidding in the dirt. Keanu barely managed to jump clear before the vehicle slammed into a guard tower, flipping on impact. 3 trucks, 3 kills. But the battlefield was still burning. Marcus regrouped, his rifle smoking. That's not the last of them. Keanu wiped blood from his brow. No. But we just took their hammer away. Then the radio buzzed again. Carlos. His voice was shaking. They're bringing in the final wave. Keanu looked up. Al Diablo was gone. But in the distance, more headlights appeared. Sombra Negro wasn't finished. They were just getting started. Keanu steadied his breathing, his grip tightening around his rifle. Dust clouds rose in the distance. More vehicles. More soldiers. This wasn't just a battle anymore, it was a siege. He could feel the exhaustion creeping in, but he shoved it aside. They had to hold. Marcus adjusted his scope. That's at least 40 men, maybe more. They're sending everything. Keanu exhaled slowly. Good. Let them. Ghost and Shadow crouched low, their eyes locked on the approaching convoy. The dogs weren't tired. They weren't afraid. They were ready. The first shots rang out. Sombra Negra's final assault had begun. A hail of bullets tore through the compound. Windows shattered. Debris exploded into the air. The ground trembled under the relentless barrage. Keanu and Marcus fired back, picking off targets one by one. But for every enemy they dropped, 3 more took their place. Then came the breach. A demolition charge detonated at the north gate, sending fire and steel raining down. The mercenaries surged forward. Close quarters combat. No more distance. No more cover. Keanu drew his pistol and knife. Time to finish this the hard way. Ghost and Thunder struck first. Silent. Deadly. Precise. The German shepherd tackled one soldier to the ground, his jaws crushing the man's throat. Thunder barreled into another, sending him crashing into a wall before clamping down on his leg. Keanu moved like a shadow through the chaos, his blade finding flesh, his gun spitting death. Every step was a battle. Every breath was a war. Then he saw him. Al Diablo. The cartel leader stood at the heart of the battlefield, his rifle in one hand, a machete in the other. He wasn't hiding anymore. He was here to end this. Keanu's grip tightened around his knife as El Diablo stepped forward, the battlefield around them fading into background noise. The air smelled of blood, smoke, and burnt gunpowder. This wasn't just another fight. This was the final confrontation. The cartel leader rolled his shoulders, whirling the machete in his right hand like it was an extension of his arm. His eyes burned with fury and something else, respect. He knew Keanu wasn't like the others he had crushed. Keanu was a warrior. You should have taken my offer, El Diablo said, circling him. Keanu smirked, keeping his stance loose. Not really my style. The words had barely left his mouth when El Diablo struck. A blur of steel. Keanu dodged left, narrowly avoiding the blade slicing through the air. He countered with a quick jab, but the cartel leader was fast. Too fast. El Diablo spun, delivering a savage elbow to Keanu's ribs, sending him stumbling back. Keanu barely had time to recover before the machete came down again. He raised his forearm, deflecting it just enough to avoid a fatal blow, but the blade still bit into his flesh. He hissed in pain but didn't slow down. Ghost growled nearby, watching, waiting, ready to strike. Keanu signaled the dog to stay back. This was his fight. El Diablo grinned, his blade dripping with Keanu's blood. You're tough. I respect that. Keanu spat onto the dirt, wiping sweat from his brow. You talk too much. Then he attacked. Keanu feinted left, forcing El Diablo to commit to a block, then pivoted, slamming his knife deep into the cartel leader's side. The blade cut through muscle, but El Diablo barely flinched. He snarled, gripping Keanu's wrist, yanking him forward, and driving a knee into his gut. Keanu's vision blurred for half a second, just long enough for El Diablo to throw him to the ground. The machete flashed. Keanu rolled, barely avoiding the blade embedding itself into the dirt where his head had been. He kicked out, catching El Diablo's ankle, knocking him off balance. Both men scrambled to their feet, bloody, battered, but unrelenting. This wasn't just about survival anymore. This was about finishing what had been started, and neither man intended to lose. Keanu's muscles burned, but he ignored the pain. This fight was about endurance now. El Diablo was just as fast, just as deadly, and neither of them was willing to fall first. The cartel leader lunged again, swinging the machete in a brutal arc. Keanu barely sidestepped, feeling the wind of the blade slicing past his face. No more defensive moves. It was time to finish this. Keanu shifted his weight, launching forward with precise brutality. He drove his shoulder into El Diablo's chest, slamming the cartel leader against a wrecked vehicle. The impact knocked the machete from his hand, the steel clattering onto the dirt. Keanu didn't give him a chance to recover. A savage punch to the ribs. Another to the jaw. Bone cracked. Blood sprayed. El Diablo grunted, stumbling, but before Keanu could press the attack, a hidden knife flashed in the dim light. Pain tore through Keanu's side. The blade had found flesh. He gritted his teeth, grabbing El Diablo's wrist before the knife could go deeper. The two men struggled, locked in a deadly grip, muscles straining. Keanu twisted hard, forcing the weapon free. Then he retaliated. A headbutt. Sharp. Violent. El Diablo reeled back, dazed. Keanu saw his opening. One movement. One final strike. Keanu grabbed his own knife and drove it straight into El Diablo's heart. The cartel leader's eyes widened, his breath hitching. For the first time, there was fear. He staggered back, staring at the blade buried in his chest. His strength failed. He collapsed to his knees. Keanu stood over him, blood dripping from his wounds, his breathing ragged. El Diablo chuckled, a broken sound. You think this ends with me? His lips curled into a smirk. Sombra Negra will never stop. Keanu pulled the knife free. Then, I'll be waiting. One last slash clean final. El Diablo fell, lifeless. The battlefield grew quiet. The remaining cartel soldiers, seeing their leader dead, dropped their weapons and fled into the desert. The siege was over. Iron Fang still stood. Keanu exhaled slowly, feeling Ghost press against his leg. They had won. But war never truly ended. Not for men like him. The desert was silent again. The echoes of gunfire had faded, leaving only the distant howl of the wind. Iron Fang still stood. The facility was battered, scarred by bullets and explosions, but it had survived just like those who had fought for it. Keanu stood at the center of it all, bloodied but unbroken. Ghost sat beside him, his white fur stained with dirt and sweat. The war was over. Marcus approached, rifle slung over his shoulder. Hell of a night, Keanu smirked, wiping a streak of blood from his face. I've had worse. Carlos and Emily emerged from the medical bay. Most of the dogs are fine, Emily reported. Rex took a few hits, but he'll pull through. Keanu crouched, running a hand over Rex's fur. The Malinois wagged his tail weakly, still ready for more. Warriors didn't stop not even when the battle was done. As dawn broke over the desert, Carlos checked his radio. No more chatter from Sombra Negra. Looks like they're running scared. Keanu wasn't convinced. Cartels never truly disappeared. They always came back stronger, smarter. But next time, Iron Fang would be ready. Marcus lit a cigar, exhaling slowly. So, what now? Keanu looked over the battlefield, at the fallen enemies, the scars left behind. Then he turned toward his dogs, his team, his home. He wasn't going anywhere. We rebuilt.